Hello, everybody, and welcome back to tracking our local shifting real estate market here in southern New Jersey, Burlington, Camden, Gloucester counties, 900,000 and below. I got three things for you today. We got some weekly stats to go over. We got our February averages to go over. And then we got my 8 reasons why it is difficult to buy a home right now. And I'm going to lay them all out and probably my guidelines on how to work around them, work with them, work within them, however you want to chalk that up. So let's rip through these. All right. So we're here in week 9 of the year, last week of February. So the biggest thing to jump out from this year is we have tied our all-time highest median list price. If I go back to last year and I factor this, and it should have been right, it should have been like right in here. We got up to 345 here once. We got up to 345 here. And this is in June and July of the year. I thought we had dipped one time at a 349. Here we go. Week 2 of September of last year, we hit 349. That was the highest we ever hit as a median list price. Looks like we also had a little bit back in November here. So it hit for basically 2 of those weeks, and then we sort of saw it drop off a little bit. So with that being said, our 349 median list price is tied for the highest listing price since the start of 2023. Now, do we expect to see that continue? Yeah, I do expect to see that continue because every single market condition that has given rise to the price increase that we've dealt with since the start of 2023 is continuing. So our total active listings unfortunately took a hit. We were at 1202, 1205 the first 2 weeks of February. We jumped up to 1250 and back down to about 1240. But it's going to have some rocks along the way. It's not going to be linearly up the whole time, but that's what I like to see. And we can see new, pending, and closed 277, 243, 217. That's a good ratio. That's the ratio we want to see for new listings coming on and not as many coming off. So that's great. Our expired, withdrawn, and cancels, unsurprisingly, low. These are going to stay low. Our price reductions had a little bit of a peak here. I think it was really just because it's the end of the month. We're going to get a little bit more of those expireds. Same thing though, our average and median days on market are still rock bottom. Little change in the median days on market, but still the average and the median hyper low, some of the lowest that we've had other than the peak selling season last year in this kind of like May, June, July period. It was a little bit lower than that, but not by much. I mean, a touch in here, but it really ramped up. Let's take a look at some averages. So for me, not surprising here on the weeklies, but as we start looking at our averages, we're down in inventory from January to February, but we're way up in terms of new listings. Not surprising. January is kind of a slow time. We would expect to see that coming up a little bit. The pendings did increase. The closed did increase. So we did have increases in pretty much all of our new pending and closed items, but a slightly lower amount of inventory than the start of the year. Expired and withdrawn and canceled have gone up. We've stayed fairly similar in price reductions, but again, just way faster. And you talk to any agent, they'll tell you about this. Like, it has gotten quicker and faster just in this first couple weeks of the year as we've been looking through everything. Okay. And then again, unsurprisingly, our median list price is going to start increasing. So we're kind of all moving in the direction we thought, with a faster market with a little bit more inventory. That's basically the gist of it, right? Slightly faster, slightly more inventory. But let's jump to this. And in the spirit of trying to keep these videos a little tighter and a little bit faster, I'm going to just kind of keep going through this. So these are the 8 reasons I believe it is difficult to buy a home in today's market. So let's run through these. High housing demand. Often a high demand for homes, but a limited supply, particularly in desirable areas. This imbalance can lead to bidding wars and inflated prices, making it challenging for buyers to secure a property within the budget. This is why we're going over this entire thing. The demand is high, and a supply is fairly fixed without a lot replacing it. And so as we look at our macroeconomics, when demand is high, supply is low, it's going to be difficult because there'll be too many buyers for every one home sold. Okay, I like that one. Rising home prices. Home prices have been steadily increasing in many markets due to various factors such as population growth, low housing inventory, and low mortgage interest rates. Higher prices mean buyers need larger down payments and may face affordability issues. So the low mortgage interest rates, that was kind of before. Now it's really the rising home prices has to do a lot with the demand aspect of it. It's not really the interest rates, because we know interest rates are actually kind of high right now as compared to where they've been. So the demand is what's pushing these high prices. And we've seen that, right? We've seen that in January, our average last year was 312. Then we jumped up to the 340 mark. We were hanging up there for quite a while. We've been eclipsed into 345, and now we're here back at 340. So we can see from our own data, from our own area of checking this stuff, yes, we can see that this price has in fact gone up almost 10, 12, 15% in some instances in some neighborhoods. All right, tight mortgage lending standards. Mortgage lenders have become more stringent in their lending criteria since the 2008 financial crisis. Buyers need good credit scores, stable employment, and sufficient income to qualify for a mortgage. These requirements can pose challenge for some potential buyers, especially first-time buyers or those with lower incomes. I agree with this. I don't think that this is having a too big of effect because this isn't new. We've had these lending standards now for over 10 years. That to me doesn't make as much of a sense, but I do get it. There were some people before that had 550 credit scores that could afford two houses. So you're right. Today, most of the time, if you're under 580 or 600, it's going to be very difficult for you to buy. You do need very specific amounts of money in reserves to be able to purchase. You can't just like empty your bank account to buy. You even have to have some money in the bank. So I guess that makes sense. But would I think that this is a leading contender? Probably not the leading contender. I think the demand is still in the demand and the price are still kind of the two in the ballpark for me that are the biggest issues. Competition from investors. Institutional investors and cash buyers often compete with individual home buyers, particularly in hot markets. These investors may have the financial resources to make all cash offers or purchase multiple properties, squeezing out traditional buyers. Not as true in our area. The area of the country where you're starting to have this issue is in a lot of the new construction developments in the Midwest and the West, because when they're coming to market, institutional investors are buying up half of the development, right? They're charging rent prices on all of those, and then they're reappraising the homes as they go, and they can just earn equity as they do all these reappraisals. It's a very complicated market dynamic, but in our area of South Jersey, I don't think investors are quite the issue from an institutional investor standpoint. Now, where this is difficult is if you are a buyer that says, "Hey, I'm considering using a renovation loan." Yeah, all the investors in this area are also looking at that property, and they're probably going to buy it cash. And they're probably going to be able to bid it up because they know they can control their expenses. They're not contracting a lot of these things out. They're doing it themselves. So as you sit there trying to say like, "Well, I want to buy this home and then I have to use a contractor for everything," the after repair value versus what you're going to pay for it and all those numbers, those tend to not work out all that well. So I would say if you are trying to do a renovation style project, yes, the investors in this area are hungry for projects, and because their expenses are much lower, the numbers are going to make sense for them to be able to bid higher on the home because they're doing the renovation for less, where you would be sort of the opposite. You have to want to buy low, renovate high to make the numbers work out. So a decent one, but only in probably 250 and under price points. Limited housing inventory. I think this is basically the same correlation of high demand. Low housing inventory is a persistent issue in many areas, driven by factors such as restrictive zoning laws, kind of. Slow new construction, definitely. And homeowners staying in their homes longer, most definitely. Limited inventory means fewer options for buyers and can lead to increased competition and higher prices. Of course, for me, it's this last part. Homeowners staying in their homes longer. We used to talk about, hey, people leave on average every 7 years. It's now almost every 11 years. So people are just staying longer. Yes, it has to do with the fact that a lot of them had a much lower interest rate when they purchased over these past 10, 11 years. That makes sense. There's not as many things to go to, or the prices of the home that they'd want to go to are considerably higher. So it's a financially downward pressure to move. You're going to be spending more money on housing every year. Now, if you need the bigger house, go for it. But for a lot of people, they're like, why would I go to a different house at this point? I have a much lower payment. It doesn't make fiscal sense to move. So that inventory crunch is a big one. Rising interest rates, I think, is an obvious one. Fluctuations in interest rates can significantly impact the affordability of homes. When interest rates rise, the cost of borrowing increases, leading to higher monthly mortgage payments. This can deter potential buyers or reduce the size of the mortgage they qualify for. That's the kicker for me, is that it's not necessary. Like, a lot of people can handle the payments. The problem is the purchasing power has been really reduced. And so when you used to be able to buy a $400,000 home, you're only able to accommodate a 350 or 3.25 home. And most of those homes just aren't fitting the needs that you have for what your next home is. And so you just decide to not move forward with it. What I'm trying to encourage buyers to consider is that this next home you're going to get may not be a forever home. You may have to understand that this home may only be your home for 5 to 7 of those years, and then you may have to go to a new home. But you'll at least get your foot in the door. You'll at least start to have some equity that you can build up so that you can apply it to the next down payment tax deferred on your next home to be able to actually afford that next bigger home when you're at a different income bracket, when you have more money saved, when you have the equity in your home, you can then get to that other home. But that's a hard one because I have to kind of challenge the supposition of how people are approaching what this next home should be. That's a difficult one to talk to people about. All right, difficulty saving for down payment and closing costs. I think this is a big one. Saving for a down payment and covering closing costs can be major barriers to homeownership, particularly for first-time homebuyers. In areas with high home prices, the required payment amount can be substantial. Additionally, closing costs, which typically range from 2 to 5% of the home's purchase price, add upfront expenses buyers must plan for, making it harder to enter the market. This is a big one because with inflation and affordability, our money has started to have to spread out to a lot more items. Groceries, gas, insurance, all of those things have increased substantially. And so when if you're bringing $3,000 in every 2 weeks and you are sitting there saying like, okay, well, I only had to spend $1,000 on rent and then another $800 on all my other stuff and I was saving $1,200 a month. Well, now it's like, okay, well, I'm spending $1,000 on this. I'm spending $1,500 on all that other stuff. And now I'm only saving $500 a month. So just the ability to save, because we haven't seen wages really come up as commensurately as the expenses that we've seen on our end have, just the cost of living, I would say it is much more difficult to save because you just don't have as much margin in your budget anymore. So I think that's probably the demand, the prices, the inventory, and the difficulty in saving for down payment. I think those are a little bit more important than the lending standards, the competition for investors, and the interest rates. But this is another big one, probably lowest on the list, but I do think it's one to consider. Remote work and migration patterns. The rise of remote work has led to shifts in migration patterns with individuals and families relocating to areas with lower cost of living, better quality of life, or more favorable climates. This increased demand for housing in certain regions can put pressure on local markets, leading to decreased affordability, heightened competition for available homes. Additionally, the ability to work remote has widened the pool of potential buyers, further intensifying competition and driving up prices in desirable areas. Okay, we're going to wrap up with this one, but this is an interesting one because I think it's making two things happen. One, if you can work remotely, your ability to look somewhere else to buy a home increases dramatically. I have folks right now that are going to be looking to buy in South Jersey, even though they have jobs that are in New York. They're like, yeah, we have to go to the office, but we only have to go once a week now. So they're like, we'll take the train. We'll do that one time a week. We'll go up there and we'll do our work, but I can move somewhere else. So I actually think this one helps a little bit in that it's opening up the area in which you can search. And yes, you can move to a slightly lower income area or a slightly less pricey area in order to get everything you need. But at the same time, if that starts happening too much, like in our area of South Jersey, we are getting a ton of the North Jersey buyers who have much more remote work options now that are starting to flood our market. And most of the time they have higher wages. They have more equity in their current properties. And so they are starting to come in and flood our market with really high bids. And those are some of when you've seen some of these Marlton or Mount Laurel or Moorestown homes that are going 100,000 over asking price, like half the time it's from a North Jersey buyer with a North Jersey attorney coming down and just like saying, hey, well, I'm selling my 2-bed condo for $700,000. I'm making $400,000 in equity. I'll just put all that money down into the next house. So anyway, I'd say this one's a little odd. You could talk about it a few different ways, but I think as a general thought, all of these are true. All of these are true. So the things that we have to talk about, and I just did this in a meeting this morning when I had a buyer meeting, we sort of talked about all these things and how we can be smart inside of the search. I think from a demand and an inventory perspective, you got to know about properties quickly. And that's why our MLS searches are so important. When we start talking about rising home prices, being tight with your comparables, your CMA, your comparative market analysis, you really have to understand this pricing inside and out to be able to make just the right offer to get the house without overspending. The tight mortgage lending standards and the difficulty saving for down payment and closing costs. That's why I talk all the time about my financial stuff. I always like to go to the financial stuff. I've given multiple debt repayment methods. I've given credit recommendations on how to improve your credit, different ways you can cut expenses at the home. I think we did it here, upgrades to save money, calculating money return on equities, to protecting against a cold to help protect your expenses. So we've covered a number of those things just on this channel alone, just trying to get these two things dialed in. Competition from investors. Again, if you're going to be savvy about doing a renovation project, start doing the research on how to do a lot of those projects yourself so you don't have to contract everything out, and then you can compete with them at the slightly higher buy-in price because you'll be able to reduce your ability to work on that project. And then I'd say remote work and migration pattern. Understand from your job if you do have the ability to go remote, just because they're not offering it doesn't mean they might not say yes. And so if you're someone who's like, wow, I can only live in the Sussex County and it's in Essex County where it's really expensive. Hey, wait, I talked to my boss and he said I only have to come in 1 day a week if I really need to. Great. I can start moving either into PA. I can start moving down the shore. I can start moving kind of more like Toms River, Manasquan, or Egg Harbor Township, and even go down far that way. I can move into the Pemberton area. I can move to great. So you have a lot of options here for what you could do if that's remote. So anyway, I know this was kind of a fast and furious one today, but I wanted to rip through again. We had our good February, just end of the month. We had our decent averages that are actually trending okay. But these reasons here, you got to be able to understand these because as you read the news, this is what they're talking about. All right, y'all. Have a good week. See ya.